What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the upcoming Blu-ray release of Spiritwalker. What's going on, guys? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to Victims and Villains, we create content like what you're watching right now, simply to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name's Captain Nostalgia. I am a writer and podcaster, as well as the director of our film festival, Horrific Hope. You guys can get details on more podcasts, more movie reviews like this, all of our social media, Patreon, and as well as this year's lineup of films, where to get tickets, our sponsors, and much more. All of that is in the links below. As I mentioned in the start, we're going to be talking about the Blu-ray release of Spiritwalker. This is a 2020 action thriller that you guys can pick up for yourselves if you are interested in hearing what I had to say. The spoiler-free video this upcoming Tuesday, April 12th, from Wellgo Entertainment. So I'm going to basically consolidate this as easily as I can. When you're talking about the plot, this is Memento meets Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Allow me to explain. Our protagonist, Ian, wakes up in the body of another man, and he basically is hopping from one body to another every 12 hours. All while trying to piece together how he ended up in the events of the opening to this movie. To say this right off the bat, as I said, this movie is Memento meets Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Those are two titles you are going to hear throughout the duration of this, because quite honestly, I just can't separate the two. I really like the whodunit aspect of this movie. I think it's one of the strongest legs that this movie has to offer. It stands really well, kind of bringing this, like, piecing together this mystery of our protagonist. And with his ability to hop bodies every 12 hours, it makes for a really interesting dynamic between him and some of the characters. And I'll be honest, there are character interactions that, because he's trying to constantly fight against the clock but also hopping bodies at the same time, it does become tiresome rather quickly. The Invasion of the Body Snatchers aspect of this movie is a rather intriguing thing to kind of throw in here, and it's one of the more interesting elements that this film uses. Though whether or not it's actually always used properly is another story in and of itself. It's not necessarily a bad portion of the movie, but it is kind of a very underused portion of the movie, is what I'll say. And that leads into the action. The action for this movie is very lackluster. For as much as I can say, this movie really didn't thrill me or grip me the way that I was anticipating on it doing so. I have to give credit where credit is due. This movie has amazing fight choreography, and subsequently with that fight choreography, the camera work that flows in and out of that to make the fights just has amazing fluidity. I realized I just tripped over my words. Oh well. The performances are fine. Pacing is equally fine, except the movie feels like, and I'm not joking about this, the movie feels like it peaks 2/3 of the way in. Like, I'm watching this movie and I can't help but be like, oh man, like this climax is just like really well done, and pop up the timer button and notice that there's still a half hour left. Color me disappointed at that moment, because the last act / half hour of this movie is just really dull, and it just doesn't bring the conclusion that I, as a viewer, wanted to have. The last act of this movie just is really dull. It is just really lifeless. Like, yes, like, things happen, and there's supposed to be things that are supposed to bring emotions out of you, but it didn't connect. Maybe I'm like one in like a billion that's saying this about this movie, that like maybe I'm not the audience for this movie, but for me, like, I just wasn't able to connect to these characters the way that I was anticipating on it. And the more you watch it, the more you understand why I can say something like that. Talk about Ian's journey of identity throughout the course of this movie in our mental health moments. But why delay the inevitable? Let's run this through our Rorschach rating scale. And I just want to remind you guys one more time before I give my rating, you guys can check out Spiritwalker and decide for yourself what you guys think about it when it hits shelves on April 12th from Well-Go Entertainment. Said I've got a 2.5 locked and loaded for this bad boy. It would have been higher if it wasn't for that last act. That's all I'm going to say. Let's jump into our mental health moment, shall we? If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health and we basically talk about it for a few moments in hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. As I said in the beginning of this video, Ian, our protagonist, basically spends 12 hours in each body and he is constantly searching and trying to piece together. But also at the same time, there's like that a little bit of brain fog there that the protagonist from Memento was going through. And so in returns, he also loses kind of touch with who he is as an individual. And I know we've talked about this several times on the podcast, but losing your identity to someone or something or being unsure of who you are as an individual. And before I go any further, I'm going to say this statement because it's going to be a frame of mind for how the rest of what I'm going to say is going to flow into this. When I say identity, I do not mean what you as an individual does for a hobby or for a living. I make podcasts, I do videos. I would never say that I am a podcaster and video. I would never say that my identity is in that. For me personally, my identity comes from Christ, and it comes from what the Bible teaches. It comes from being a husband, and also a horror enthusiast. But it took me many years, if not a couple decades, to actually reach to those points of saying, these are 3 strong periods of my life that I'm reflecting and saying, I'm a Christian, I'm a husband, I'm a horror fanatic. Like, those took a long time for me to take up residency there. Because for a while, I struggled in my faith. I've only been a husband for the better part of a decade. And despite how much I love horror, I've only been a horror fan for really almost 10 years. It took a lot of searching and a lot of questions, asking and a lot of conversations and asking hard questions and really challenging myself and having others challenge me to understand who I was as an individual and not be shaking of my life. This is what I'm wondering about with you. Who are you? And how can you say that you are what you say you are? Identity is a very crucial thing when it comes to mental health. Because as the sucker punch line goes, and I understand it's from other things as well, if you don't believe in something, you'll fall for anything. And, well, as a friend of mine says, depression is a liar. Suicidal tendencies are liars. Anxiety is a liar. That list just goes on and on and on. When was the last time you really reflected and asked yourself, who am I? Who am I as an individual? Because that's one of the things that this film does right, is it really demonstrates and shows the mental health strain that comes from not knowing the answer to that question. So as I do for every video, I just want to encourage you guys, if you or someone you know is struggling to answer any of these questions, have these hard conversations, click the links in the descriptions below, check out our mental health resource library, and be sure that you guys check out Spiritwalker when it hits Blu-ray and VOD as well as DVD beginning April 12th from Well-Go Entertainment. Have a good night, guys.